Video games have always been a huge part of my life. And I've always really kind of played my way through many experiences. And a lot of these games have influenced me and prepared me for what I believe is career engineering. So I'm Gil, and today I will talk to you about how video games have prepared me for life in engineering. Now, this is my Twitter handle, and I strongly encourage you to tweet at me for anything and everything, especially if you disagree with me, because Twitter is the place to disagree with people, and everybody's going to be real civil about it. A little bit about who I am. For the past 2 years, I've been working on infrastructure at AppsFlyer, which is a totally awesome place, and we're hiring. And in the past, I worked for a whole bunch of other places which were not as awesome as AppsFlyer is. The QR code, by the way, is also for my Twitter handle. So do the tweeting. This is me about 25 years ago. Just, playing away at something. And here are the rules for this presentation. I can only discuss games that I actually played or tried to as a kid, and only games that people might actually recognize. So first up, The Incredible Machine. Who here has played this? Tweet if you played it, especially for that whole nostalgia. Now, for those of you who have not played it, The Incredible Machine is essentially a combination of all these gadgets and gizmos that you need to combine together in some magical way to get something to work, which might be as simple as just turning on the light or something. And that is practically the definition of every Python script I've seen in production for as long as I can remember. And again, tweet if you agree with me. Tetris. So I've been playing Tetris since forever, and I still play it, by the way. There are really cool variants that you can play today. And what Tetris taught me is that while your accomplishments go away and are forgotten quickly, all the tech debt that you have accumulated by bad decisions haunts you forever. Pac-Man. This is how you run away from tasks that you do not want to complete yet, but eventually they will catch up to you, and you should take some pills along the way to deal with that. Mega Man. So Mega Man was this cool platformer from the 80s and 90s, pretty awesome. And it doesn't look that interesting, but Mega Man has a really cool thing about it where you can choose the path. I mean, you could choose which enemies you take on first. So if I take on Torchman first, I get his power and then can use that power against Bitman, which is kind of similar to the way that we deal with our own problems, meaning that when we learn new skills by dealing with a certain problem first, we can take those skills later and apply them to problems later, which is pretty awesome. So the path that you take has a strong influence over the solutions that you're going to come up with. Boxing. Now, boxing and in general fighting games have this really cool thing about them where your enemies have tells, meaning that if you play them long enough, your mind subconsciously knows how to recognize these patterns of when an attack is coming. And this is pretty much what every senior engineer has. We have the ability to predict problems before we actually have to deal with them. And this is why we value seniority. SimCity. So SimCity is a really cool game, which you should definitely play if you haven't. This is the really old version from the 80s. And what this version had, or actually any kind of SimCity version has, is that you have to build an actual ecosystem. You cannot just build the stuff that brings you money and neglect all the rest. The same way your production system cannot be super high-end on one side and a complete clusterfuck on the other side. So it teaches you to also balance a budget. You have limited resources. It really is a good simulation of management. Ooh, and another one of my favorites, Space Invaders. So Space Invaders, Space Invaders has a really cool story about bug to feature sort of thing. You see, back in the 70s when they made this game, the compute power is very, very limited for these machines. And one of the things that happened as a result of that is that the computer cannot render all the little tiles at the same time, which causes a slowdown when you start the game. However, once you get rid of enemies, suddenly the computer has enough power and they start going much, much faster, which is very similar to how problems in real life are, where we start out by having all these things that move kind of slowly. And then when we take care of problems, the other ones that we've neglected become much more acute. And I'm guessing you all can kind of sympathize with that. Oh, another one of my favorites, Lemmings. Who here played Lemmings? Lemmings was awesome. You have to kind of get these tiny creatures, which are kind of dumb, from point A to point B without them dying. And there's a lot of obstacles along the way. And if you think about it, in many ways, this can be, you know, the route of your traffic when it comes into your production system, or the route of data that you have when you're moving around Kafka queues, or even the journey that your developers take, taking their code from their laptops to production. It's not that they're not intelligent, they just have no context. And that's one thing that, you know, we try to solve as engineers. But you know, the most important thing that all these things had in common, they ran on MS-DOS. And MS-DOS was not the most friendliest of things. It kind of looked like this, if you don't remember. And you had to learn how to use a command line to use them. And my dad was a really smart guy, said that if we want to get our video game fixed, we're going to have to learn how to use a terminal. And we didn't have a Nintendo or Sega or whatever at home. We had to deal with this. And I've pretty much been in the terminal ever since, sort of. And you also had to do these things. You have to configure all these memory management options and drivers and all these kind of hooks and things to get your games running, which is, once you think of it, kind of not that different from what we do today in our jobs to get, you know, production systems running. And we contrast that with what kids have today, where they just kind of click away to something and suddenly the game appears. I think we kind of killed the critical path of getting people into our industry, which is kind of sad. But like all problems, some people are trying to fix them. So for example, this is a cool thing called Scratch, which tries to get kids to program their own video games and then kind of pull them into the world of programming, which is pretty cool. And this is a Raspberry Pi laptop, which kids can put together to learn, you know, that laptops aren't just that thing that, you know, just magically arrives from Amazon in the mail. So this is me. I'm Gil. This is my email. This is my Twitter handle. I love to discuss all these things. I love just talk about these things endlessly. And I would love to hear from you, what you think, if you agree with me, if you disagree with me. And thank you very much. And now I need to understand how I give control back to Mark.